It is my absolute pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this General Counsel Roundtable today on behalf of the fourth floor. Today's topic, Web3 is coming, whether you're ready or not. So what do you need to know as a General Counsel? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities that Web3 and the metaverse present to businesses and then by extension to their in-house legal function? Our goal today is to have really just a candid conversation about how General Counsel can best navigate essentially this brave new world. And we will hear from our panel of experienced General Counsels. They come from several different industries, which gives some great perspective about how they are preparing for and positioning their companies to thrive as we all inevitably move towards the metaverse and Web3. So we do have a full house today. There's over 115 RSVPs. So if you could please keep yourself muted and just get your questions ready. We'll be doing our best to pay attention as they come in, as the questions come in, but we're also going to allocate some time at the end of each discussion section for questions from the audience, so don't be shy. Before we dive in, just a very brief word about the fourth floor. For those of you who don't know, we hack the system and we provide a place for women, especially lawyers, although not only lawyers, to initiate and advance for-profit board careers, to earn equity and to invest. And we're doing this by tapping into the under-leveraged value of women entrepreneurs. We help women founders access funding and also growth opportunities by leveraging advisory and governing boards, but also our backroom investment club, which by the way, has just come out of beta. And so if you are not a member of the fourth floor, please consider joining us. You might want to sign up for an upcoming board bootcamp. There's one in about a month. We'll drop the link in the chat. You can also sign up for a platform tour. Both of those events are just a really great way to learn what we're all about, figure out if this makes sense for you. Finally, last announcement, we do have an event that's open to the public. It's really interesting. It is for anyone who might be LP curious or curious about investing full stop. So if that's you, please consider joining this upcoming AMA with several experienced general partners of women-led funds. They can answer all of your questions. Also, as a bonus, if you attend the event, you'll have the opportunity to join our growing wait list for discounted membership to our backroom investment club only, which we will be opening up to people outside of the fourth floor in a couple of months. So great reason to come to that event. But enough about me, enough about the fourth floor. Let's get to the point why we are all gathered here today, which is Web3 and the metaverse. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce all of you to our fantastic panelists who will join me in the spotlight. As I mentioned them, we have Lisa Annis. Oh, we have Flavia Naves, who comes to us from, from Circle. I just lost the name of your company, from FinTech Company Circle. And we also have Lisa Anastos, Chief Legal Officer of IdeaQuest. And we have Caroline McCaffrey, who's an experienced general counsel for tech companies until she turned CEO and founder herself of her own tech company. She also hosts a series focusing on privacy and security in the metaverse. So she is joining us as well. Okay, fantastic. So I will let each one of these incredible women introduce themselves at more length. So Lisa, let's start with you.
Welcome, everyone. It's so great to see everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is Lisa Anastos, and I am currently the Chief Legal Officer of IdeaQuest, which is a sports marketing, sports tech boutique that's based in the New York area.
Awesome. Caroline.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Fun topic to be discussing. I'm Caroline McCaffrey. I am the CEO, one of the co-founders of a company called ClearOps. ClearOps stands for Clear Operations for Privacy and Security. So that really says it all what we do. We help you with your privacy and security operations.
Amazing. Welcome. Flavia.
Thank you, Brain, and it's great to be here again. My name is Flavia Naves. I'm the General Counsel at Circle. Circle is a stablecoin issuer. The company was originally based in Boston, but now we're based everywhere. I'm based in the Bay Area. And we enable businesses to thrive by using stablecoins and the power of blockchains.
Amazing. Welcome. So excited to have all of you here. Okay, so let's open up this discussion by starting with the basics. So what is Web3? What is the metaverse? So my understanding, just as someone who really has not known what this is, has done some research, had some conversations, what I can glean is that one way to think of it is that first, we connected information and we got the internet, and that was Web 1.0. Then we connected people and we got social media, and that was Web 2.0. And now we're connecting people, places, and things. And sometimes we're doing that in a fully virtual environment, sometimes in a partially virtual environment, and that is Web 3. That's what I have gleaned from the internet. So Lisa, how does this line up with your understanding about Web 3 and the metaverse? And then also, if you can tell us, are they the same thing? Like, how is the metaverse related to Web 3?
That's a great question because it is constantly being debated. So, I like to think of as, and I'm going to take it from my industry, which is sports right now. So if you look at Web 1.1, it's your original sort of website, which just was basic information. You were getting here from a sports perspective, it was sports scores. It was very flat, and just strictly informative. Now enter Web 2.0. This is where you have content, and this is where you have interaction. And this is where you sort of have these centralized systems of websites. This is your definition of Facebook, and the concept of centralized is important now when you start leaning to Web 3.0, where the core of some of it is decentralized. And Web 3.0, there is a debate, Web 3.0 from a high level is what people say. It's based on tokens, it's based on blockchain, it's based on how it's built. But the reality is Web 3 is an evolution from Web 2.0, which includes sort of the metaverse, which is part 2.0 and part 3.0. So you're trying to evolve into sort of this new world. So from sort of a basic standpoint, everyone thinks Web 3.0 is blockchain, so everyone's heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, but that can be used in a 2.0 setting and a 3.0 setting. So NFT, so in a metaverse, which doesn't necessarily need to be built on blockchain, which you'll hear about when you talk, Web 3.0, you can have your own virtual world. So you can have your own virtual Super Bowl in that world. And that's, where you have your own advertisement. And that's more of what you would say a decentralized world. So I'm no longer dependent on being on Facebook to connect with friends. I can create my own little sub-universe that could be limited, exclusive. We can create the fourth floor metaverse, and it's just the fourth floor members. And we're not dependent on connecting based on a centralized body. So from a high level, I try to keep things really simple from that perspective, just so it makes sense while we're thinking about it, because Web 3.0 is an evolution. We're sort of thinking, what it means. And we'll all three of us here probably on this panel have very different experiences and thoughts about it, but, because it's evolving, which is why it's so exciting.
Okay, no, that's so helpful, really interesting. So it sounds like the metaverse, it is in fact part of Web3. It is not Web3. Web3 is this evolution. I love how you phrased that. I think that's a great way to think about it. That's super helpful. Okay, so Caroline, let's talk about some of the defining characteristics of Web3. So I know, Lisa, you're hitting on them a little bit, this decentralization thing. I know, Caroline, you mentioned that. Also, this bit about open source. So maybe if we just kind of first dive into what are these defining characteristics in this evolution, and then we'll take it from there. Oh, you're muted, Caroline.
Sorry, but I clicked that off. What I think is really interesting about Web3, and as Lisa said, the decentralization aspect of it is when it comes to decentralization, there's this movement towards anyone being able to take the source code of whatever your sort of businesses or just whatever you're doing on the web, and open sourcing it so anyone else can replicate it and do it themselves. So so in order to be fully decentralized, you can't protect the IP of, let's say, a Facebook, because then that is really just the epitome of how centralization works, is sort of saying, okay, I own this code, and so therefore no one else can take it and replicate what we're doing. In decentralization, anyone can replicate the business. And so you will see a lot of these businesses that are in Web3, blockchain-based businesses have their, it's all subject to open source licenses, their code, and they'll actually make it available on their websites so that anyone can go in and immediately fork it. And so it's a very interesting challenge as an attorney because open source licensing is a complex area. And so to join a company where they are essentially saying anyone can come in and copy our source code, it just presents those legal challenges of what do you mean by anyone? Are there restrictions on the license? You know, there's just a lot of things to think through and talk through with your other colleagues.
Right. No, that's so interesting and a really good point. And I wonder, okay, so say you're in an established business and you don't, you know, at the moment, your business does not, you know, they're not leveraging open source, or at least not publicly, right? They're not putting their IP out there. Is it the case that as businesses start to find new revenue streams because of the opportunities that, you know, this evolution of Web3 presents, that then they will be relying on this open source technology? And then if the answer is yes to that, like, does it have to be sort of made public? Is that part of the license that's a requirement?
Well, the concept for me with open source is the reason you open source is so that many people can contribute to the source code for constant iteration and improvement. So if you are reliant on someone else's open source code, you want it to remain available for anyone to do that with. So to then go to from Web 2, I mean, the people open source in Web 2 as well. So it's just, this is just one of the components of Web 3 where open source is extremely popular. Some people may even argue that that is part of, like, in order to be Web 3, you have to be open sourcing your source code. That's another one of those questions of what is Web 3 and is that true? But when it comes to taking an existing source code and deciding whether to open source it and how that's going to affect your business, you really have to think of it from the perspective of, is this something that is that having the contributions of the general public is going to benefit me? And then of course, I think even a question before that is, will the general public even want to contribute to this project? Because you can also have the risk of your source code going stale because no one even cares and no one's doing anything with it.
Right. Well, also, I mean, it just strongly suggests that, you know, the value of whatever the product offering is not being derived from the intellectual property. You know,
That's right.
now the value of the product offering is coming from somewhere else. So, you know, that's interesting too, when you're thinking about, like, what are the opportunities and the challenges that these businesses are going to start to experience in Web3? And then as lawyers, the in-house team, how are we thinking about it? Because the IP is so central.
Yeah.
Flavia, what does Web3 and the metaverse mean for fintech companies in particular? And obviously Circle, it's just such an amazing sort of use case, you know, so love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, decentralization is a large component of what we do, right? USDC, the stablecoin that we issue, is largely utilized in DeFi protocols for lending and other types of activity. So decentralized networks and protocols have been part of our, our company and the way that we live and breathe since Circle was issuing USDC. So it's something that we think about every day. And the challenges posed with it are, to Lisa's point, because it changes so frequently, right? I joke around with people that I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking of something, by the end of the day, something completely different. Is very much true. That's the speed that this thing moves. That you need to keep on top of what it is that is upfront, it is coming. You all probably saw there's a lot of consideration at the federal level of how to treat this from a regulatory perspective, right? Considerations around privacy, around security, around everything. And it's because it's so new, the regulators don't understand that. If you think that many of us don't get it, they also, you know, they're still dealing with rails and systems that were created 50, 60, 100 years ago. So for you to tell them, this is how data, this is how value is going to be exchanged today. And these are the concepts that we need to be thinking about, decentralization and privacy. They don't understand. They like to understand every single player in that line. And when you remove those players, are like, but wait a second, how do we make sure that folks are protected? So there's that need to protect consumers, to protect the citizens, versus enabling this technology to advance and actually to create these privacy settings, this decentralized network that will advance. So it's a constant balance between the interests that regulators and the industry have to attend to.
Great points and so well said, and also such a nice segue into sort of the, the kind of, the next discussion point, or the extension of that first discussion point, which is really like, given all of these central characteristics we're discussing, like this decentralization and data sovereignty, which you're mentioning, virtual reality, all of these characteristics, what then are some of the challenges, very pragmatically, specifically, that might crop up as a general counsel when it comes to things such as privacy, like you just said, Flavia, or advertising, or cross-border transactions? Because where are we in the world now with Web3? So Lisa, maybe you could talk a little bit about, just what you're seeing on the ground, real world, when it comes to advertising, privacy, for instance. Oh, you're muted, Lisa.
So if you're thinking of the metaverse, people are creating these virtual worlds now, and you're thinking about how do you advertise and how do you control the advertise? So, it took a while for sort of regulations to catch up with sort of Web 1.0. And, and especially from sort of a privacy consent with regards to sort of cookies. I mean, today, we still don't have federal privacy legislation. The first sort of legislation around cookie consents came out of California, but it was basically, and we were following sort of, certain regulations that came out of Europe. So I think, as Flavia correctly mentioned, regulators are sometimes chasing technology, like Biden came out with an executive order last week to sort of talk about digital economy, digital assets, which for most people, it really didn't say anything. It didn't really, it sort of mentioned we need some governance. Okay, what does that mean? Do we, and because no one knows, like, okay, and like, you want to protect the consumer. There all is that consumer, there's that concept of consumer protection. So if you put your cash in a bank, certain amount of your deposits are protected. You put your cash, you're buying Bitcoin, what does that mean? Because that's the whole concept of sort of being deregulated. There's no regulatory function. Now, what it appears to be proposed is there's a concept that, well, maybe we should have, but how do we do it? Because you're sort of conflicting with the technology now, but then there's, certain things you have to sort of think through from sort of like a thought process on how, regulations have always chased technology, and we're always, so I think there's going to be no difference with Web3. There's going to be clearly no difference with the metaverse, and, and how you control, how do you protect young people, because there's certain regulations in advertising that, protect, younger consumers. So, until we sort of really sort of clarify certain things, I really believe, regulation is going to be far behind, but it's something that, will come at the right point. The technologies may have evolved again as the time has come, but it's just to start thinking about. So from a best practices perspective, from my best practices, I sort of think about what's in place today, what should sort of be right in the future. So we could sort of base our standards from that perspective, even if there's not a regulation today, because you sort of know, what's the right thing. You don't want to target advertisement for a 7-year-old to go buy something using crypto and they're, stealing their parents' credit card. So, some of it is just common sense, but it's also sort of thinking about, where the regulations are going to take from the future, before, and for example, like before CCPR came into effect, a lot of us started basing our US privacy practices on GDPR. We knew it was going to come. We didn't know what it was going to be. We're all dreaming that someday, or at least I am, that there'll be a federal privacy regulation so I can follow one in the United States. But, so I think from that perspective, it's just sort of thinking what's there, thinking what makes common sense, and start from that perspective.
Right. Okay. And also just, really practically, like if you think about this idea of the metaverse as either this fully virtual environment or partially virtual environment, what does that mean for a business and a product offering, like how they're interacting with consumers, and then how that impacts everything you're saying about advertising and privacy. So like a company is going to advertise its product, and it needs to do that in a way that doesn't violate any of the regulations and is privacy compliant. But then how does that look different in this fully virtual or partially virtual reality? Like that, I know that when we talked a little bit about what you saw in the sports world, you know, and like fashion tech, I think was an example you gave about how just the reality of that can change.
Right. So, you know, if you're thinking about sort of now fashion tech, you now have these influencers are now in the metaverse, you know, instead of, you know, so they're, you know, promoting certain products. So they're promoting whether it's the new, you know, the new Balenciaga sneakers or, you know, the new Adidas sweatshirt. You know, there's different ways, and it's understanding sort of, you know, the requirement, whether it's sort of, how do you know it's an advertiser? How do you know that they're getting paid to play? You know, all those different things. And how do you enter that world? So I think it's all evolving in today's world on thinking about that. And because it's also going to be, I mean, ultimately it's about influencing, and it's also it's e-commerce. So is it e-commerce 3.0 when you're in the metaverse and you see someone, you like what they're wearing, and you click it, and then you could purchase it and potentially try it on your own avatar in this virtual world, in your virtual, you know, dressing room. Like there's so many exciting opportunities you could do in your privacy. So you don't have to, you know, you're doing it at home. And, you know, we've now in the last 2 years become, you know, a remote workplace, a virtual world in how we even deal on a webinar versus being face-to-face on a panel. So I think it's also partly of where we are as a country, as, you know, as the world you know, we're not entirely post-pandemic, but in, you know, getting through this pandemic and what we've learned in the last 2 years and how we now function and interact with consumers, with products. So I think that's where it's interesting to see that whole evolution.
Absolutely. And privacy. So really good point there. Like, yes, you're in the privacy of your own home, but you're, you know, virtually trying on these clothes. So what about all that information about your body? What about all this information now that, you know, fine, it's decentralized, but we're all, you know, clicked in, right? Like our phones now know everything. Alexa knows everything, whatever, you know, so what about privacy? So Caroline, since so many metaverses and Web3 are built on the blockchain, can you tell us a bit more about challenges and opportunities when it comes to privacy in the blockchain? Because I think there's both, right? There's certainly challenges. So Lisa, we just hit on some of them. What about opportunities though as well?
It's a good question. I mean, the blockchain, the one thing I've always said about the blockchain that I really like is that it's based off of it's a new technology that really came from a core concept of security. But I think we can all agree that you can have security without privacy, right? It's hard to have data privacy without data security, but you can have the security component without privacy. And blockchain is, I think, one of the best examples of that, because everything is on chain, or not everything nowadays. I'll get to that in a second. But if it is on chain, then the transaction transparency between the two parties is on chain. So it's all transparent. It's all everyone's. You know, the wallets being and the currency being exchanged is there for everyone to see, so that you can track from, you know, the currency going from one place to another, and you can make sure that there hasn't been some sort of double entry and all that kind of stuff. So it takes care of a lot of problems that we currently see in sort of the middleman processes that we currently have. But because privacy proponents came in and said, well, this is great, but it's like, you know, you're revealing people's personal transaction history. Is there a way to solve this from a privacy perspective? And this is a very, very much evolving part of blockchain, where there's now off-chain. So you can take things off-chain in order to have private transactions happen on the side, and then you pull it back into the chain. And so there's other types of encryption methods that are being experimented with, all types of stuff that's happening. That's also creating, in my mind, a huge boon for the privacy sector, because we are seeing now new technology emerge from privacy. But when it comes to blockchain, and I mean, your question was specific to blockchain, but what Lisa and you were just talking about is bigger than that when it comes to Web3 and the metaverse. There's still so many privacy and security issues that are not just blockchain related, but like you said, oh, we lost Lisa.
Oh, no.
But device related and all these things we're going to be putting on our bodies and invitations into our home and stuff. I'll try not to talk about that and stay on topic, but there's just so many issues to explore, and a lot of them do make me feel like, oh no, we are moving so fast that we need to kind of dial this back. I think the best place that we have seen and experienced the conflict with privacy and security and blockchain is in the NFT space. So NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which Lisa mentioned earlier, have come under huge scrutiny because there's been quite a lot of scams. But when I started getting into NFTs, what's really interesting is the concept of doxing. Doxing is basically maintaining your anonymity, which as a privacy person is fascinating to me, that people who were selling NFTs wanted to be anonymous and didn't want their identity to be revealed. And that was part of it. And now, because of the scams and things that have happened, people are voluntarily doxing themselves in order to provide that due diligence legitimacy. So I'm almost sad about that, because I kind of like the idea that you can have and maintain some sort of privacy, whether that's anonymity or just not revealing who you are attached to a certain NFT, in order to participate in Web3 or in the NFT trading space. So it's very much evolving. But I'm hopeful that with the new privacy technology that we're seeing come out, and the sort of the issues that arose pretty darn quickly in some of these technologies, that we're going to have figured out privacy, specifically privacy in Web3, in blockchain, in a way that is completely unique and creative.
Yeah, that really fascinating. Now, to bring it to the very tangible, the very practical, for general counsels listening, right, in-house lawyers everywhere, what should be in privacy policies, terms of use, your standard sort of SaaS, customer facing agreements, like what changes should every general counsel just be thinking about right now?
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, so the other day I was looking at this company, a blockchain technology company, and of course I was looking at a privacy policy. I look at privacy policies pretty much every single day. And what I noticed that was really interesting about their privacy policy was that they spent the first several paragraphs explaining blockchain. And basically the point was, if you are dealing with a blockchain company, if you're on chain, your privacy will not be maintained. That's the nature of the technology. Now, I have to admit, in this particular privacy policy I read, they didn't really kind of hit that point home. They kind of just explained blockchain and sort of left it up to the user to realize that this meant that their identity was going to be revealed. But if you think about that from a lawyer perspective, you're now saying, okay, so I have this obligation to have a privacy policy. In the privacy policy, I have to talk about what data we collect, why we collect it, how we collect it, and all these processes to make users aware. But now we're adding in this whole new layer of educating them on what my company does in the privacy policy versus on the website. Like I can say I'm a blockchain technology company on the website. You normally would say, well, the user knows what they're getting themselves into. I don't have to explain my business in my privacy policy. But this time we do, because the technology itself is affecting privacy.
Okay, so anyone, right, if your company, even if you're not a blockchain company, but you are a company, you have products and services, you leverage technology in some way, it's very conceivable that part of this evolution of Web3, like how it's going to affect your business and your day-to-day, is that you will potentially start to use blockchain as a technology that's supporting services you're providing. And therefore, you'll have to take another look at your privacy policy and figure out if your privacy policy is accurately addressing the privacy concerns of your clients or your users based on this technology leveraging blockchain. Is that right?
And even a step before if you're a Web2 company and you're taking the action to adopt some type of blockchain technology into your platform,
Mhm.
do you need to go get all your users to consent to using the blockchain technology, because now you are making a change to your privacy practices?
Okay, so who do you call? Like if you're an in-house legal team, I mean, just like just practically, like who do you call? Like, are you going to get on the phone and call your outside counsel and say, uh-oh, like Web3 is coming, can you help me with my privacy policy? Like, is that a good place to start? Should general counsels look to like all of these different privacy vendors out there? I know there's a ton. Like is it a consultant? Is it a lawyer? Like who's going to help the company think through, or help the general counsel advise its client about how to think through all the changes to these documents?
Yes, lawyers don't hate me, but you don't have to have a privacy lawyer to help you with these questions. It can be a privacy person, a professional who's just very well versed in privacy. But now you're looking for a specialty and someone who understands blockchain specifically. So that's the person that I would be looking for to call. And there's not that many of them yet. It's a rising niche in a profession.
Okay, so Flavia, let's go to you. And considering you are, your business model is very much leveraging blockchain, it's decentralized, like you're in this world. So how are you doing it? Like have you had to, are you kind of, I guess, on the frontier with all of these policies and your agreements, and, are you calling on a support network? Like how are you understanding all these issues and how it affects how you're advising the company?
Yeah, to say that we are at the frontier of these policies will be misleading, because as the approach changes so quickly, you can only be where you are today, and then you may have to pivot tomorrow again. So, I tell my team here that we are constantly revising these documents because the law is constantly changing, or not even a law because it may not exist. It's just interpretation and guidance on how you see the agencies or courts or other industry participants working and behaving, and then you see what it is that you need to address. For Circle, we are a B2B company, so we do not address consumer or retail activity directly. So our focus is slightly different on privacy considerations than you would do if you were dealing with retail customers. But nevertheless, we do obviously clarify to folks that they're engaged in an activity. USDC can be transacted in 8 blockchains today. It's supported in 8 different blockchains. These blockchains are different from each other. They behave differently from each other. They move differently from each other. So there's this concept of folks that say the blockchain. I say, which one, right? Because there are many. It's not a thing. Just as there's not just one cryptocurrency, there are many, and they're all different from each other, and they all behave differently from each other as well, right? So if you think of just stablecoins as what we issued today, right? We are USDC pegged to the US dollar is a fiat currency USDC stablecoin, whereby you have stablecoins that are pegged to commodity. Some of them are pegged to other smart contracts. So it's different. They're all different from each other. And for that, your engagement with your customer, your considerations that you need to have around privacy are different as well. So for example, we are a regulated entity at the state level. We are a money transmitter, right, in the United States, which means that we deal with state regulators, and they examine us on a yearly or bi-yearly basis on our practices to ensure that we're compliant with state laws. Those will include privacy and security considerations, right? We also have licenses in the state of New York, and cybersecurity in New York is really, really important. So we need to be attentive to those regulations as they are available today, because to Caroline's point, there's so many issues to consider that you can only be up to date as you think that you are up to date, and then something else happens. I think what is critical for our industry overall, and because we move so fast, as Caroline pointed, is to ensure that we are taking good faith steps to determine compliance and catch up to it as quickly as we can. Right? Regulators are not quite there yet. It behooves us as the industry to catch them up as quickly as we can and keep them up to speed on it. And some of them are more open to that conversation than others. Some of them are more advanced than others. Some of them want to learn more than others. So there's that challenge as well, that you're dealing with different levels of regulatory scrutiny, either state level, either federal level, international level. and what it is that they are thinking about and how they're looking at you. Are they putting you in a box and saying, well, you are a stablecoin issuer, hence you need to do all these different things? Or they actually try to address what it is that you service, the customers that you service, the industry that you're in, and the true risk associated with your activity, which I think it's what is really important. But Caroline brought up a very important point, that these are public blockchains, right? And this data, when it's out there, is just out there, right? We have had engagements with different regulators that want to understand what can we do to ensure that USDC in public blockchains, we have visibility into it. It's not possible, right? That is the entire concept of public blockchains and decentralized networks is that, right? So what you need to understand is the controls that are being put in place by the different players. How is it that the entire system works and behaves to ensure privacy protection, security, that you're not promoting illegal activity, money laundering or terrorist financing? These things are critical to know. And it's just ensuring that all the players are understanding what their roles and responsibilities are. Because for you to try to get a public blockchain and say, I'm going to understand exactly who is doing this from end to end, then you have a private blockchain. Then you have a permission activity, and then it doesn't serve the purpose. So to go a step further into DeFi and Web3 is the same question is, I don't understand who are all these players here. What do I need to do? But what you have to understand is the entire system, instead of trying to pick piece by piece of it, to make sure how everyone is behaving and that the system is safe and sound and is protecting people as it should.
Okay, so interesting. And it actually really makes me think of, Caroline, something you said when we were talking about this, where you said privacy and the blockchain are at odds with each other. And I didn't like fully understand what you meant. And I feel like what Flavia is saying, like, really becoming very clear how, there's just these inherent tensions. So then I wonder, like, what do you do? I mean, definitely fintech, this is a regulated space, everything you just mentioned, Flavia, like you're trying to, it's so paramount that you make sure you're on the right side of the law and all of these regulations, and it's totally a gray area. This is true in fintech. I'm sure it's true in other industries too. So what do you do as a general counsel, as an in-house legal team? Are you on the phone with those regulators? Like, are you calling them up and saying, hey, there is no federal privacy regulation. Privacy is really at odds with blockchain. Like, we have to use this technology. So like, help me, help my client and make sure that we follow the law. Are you doing that?
We do. And at times it's interesting because some of them don't believe that they need to regulate this. Some of them don't understand why they are regulating. And it is upon us to say, yes, you actually do, and here are the reasons why, right? A lot of them actually don't kind of understand what they are regulating. And to impose regulation for something that they don't understand, they prefer not to, which is actually a very good point to take. You see a lot of people reacting pretty quickly to regulation and saying, I need to regulate this because I see a problem here, without actually understanding what the problem is. Right? It's critical that you understand the risks that you're addressing with regulation. So regulation serves the purpose of keeping the system safe and sound, instead of, barring innovation and stopping people from having access to different technologies. So it's really, really important. So we do a lot of collaboration at the state level, at the federal level, and the international level to ensure that folks are looking at the right things and addressing the right risks.
Right, I bet. Okay. Okay, so I think we are going to move on to discussion point 3, because strangely, I don't see a million questions in the chat. I know that people listening have them. It's probably just difficult to figure out how to phrase them because all of this is so new. So let's go to the third discussion point. If you do have questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and we will all keep an eyeball on it and we'll try and get to them. But okay, so next point. Let's talk about all of the opportunities that Web3 and metaverse present to businesses of all kinds, because a really good general counsel might be able to help their business identify ways that they can diversify revenue streams or create new business models that, finding opportunity in this great new expansive white space that Web3 presents. I think, that would be such a huge win as an in-house legal team. So let's talk about, if you are a product company, should you be thinking about how your product is going to translate into the metaverse? And if you are a services company, should you be thinking about what services you can offer in the metaverse? Is this like a worthy exercise? Should legal teams be doing this? And then the last point on for this discussion topic, I read somewhere that in 5 years, every company is going to have a chief metaverse officer, just like, you know, we have a chief human resource officer, we will have a chief metaverse officer, because companies, all kinds, whether you're, you know, Ford, you make cars, you are a gaming company, you are LinkedIn, whatever you are, you need to be thinking about, okay, what services and products are we putting out there in the world? And then how does this translate to the metaverse? Where are all these new revenue streams? So what do you guys think about that? So Lisa, let's start with you. Do you agree? Do you think this is a C-level position 5 years from now?
I think in the consumer space, you are going to have chief metaverse officers because it's a whole new environment that someone with those skill sets are better adapt to sort of be successful in. You know, it's like you're going from brick and mortar. A traditional retailer, brick and mortar, is not going to have the same understanding of, you know, your store in the metaverse and what that means, because it's also dependent on having an understanding of data and how that works and how big products are built. So I think from that perspective, you may have, you know, you may have like a CRO for brick and mortar, or CRO for sort of, you know, Web 2.0, or, you know, and then you may have, you know, this chief metaverse who's really focusing on this virtual world and really looking for opportunities and expanding from that perspective, because it really you have to think about it in a very different world. And how do you approach individuals? How do you approach customers? How do you get, because remember, you want people also, it's the same issues about when you're dealing with online. You want stickiness. You want people to get on, you know, your site. You want to get through this experience and really stay there. And what are your goals? You want them to stay there, engage with your brand, get to know your brand, and then ultimately be a consumer of your brand in the metaverse. But then you also want to translate that into the real world. So if you're, you know, let's say, you know, one of your bigger advertisers, you know, beer, you know, so you're watching a virtual Super Bowl in the metaverse, you know, you're cheering your, you know, so you have your huge, you know, Bud advertisement. Ultimately, you want to engage that customer, so then they're purchasing that product. So how do you translate? And also, and thinking about it sort of from a marketing perspective, how do you also market now that this is sort of more open to different demographic groups? You know, how are you marketing in the metaverse to the Hispanic millennials, or which are one of your, you know, largest growing groups? And thinking about that, how do you appeal to that? Do you do a metaverse? You know, do you have your English speaking metaverse? Do you have your Spanish speaking metaverse? Do you have your metaverse that appears to, like, is it for like the people from the Northeast who like to wear a lot of black, or the people in Southern Florida who like to wear a lot of flowers? You know, thinking about, you know, you're creating also subcultures, sub dynamics. So I think that, you know, you need people who understand it, whether it's the chief metaverse officer, chief virtual reality officer. You're going to need people who specialize in that. And I think whatever the title is, there will be clearly that group of people in these consumer-based companies, and those who don't will be missing a large part of sort of the future and trying to play catch up.
Right. And then all of the operational teams inside that business will have to support those revenue streams. So, you know, these decentralized subcultures that are, you know, however they're leveraging blockchain, or they're powered by AI. I don't even know if that's accurate, but it sounds right to say that. But then, you know, any contracting or anything that's then, you know, connected to those services that protects the business, that's what the legal team is going to have to be thinking about.
Right. And one of the big things that people are now using is a metaverse. So you're sort of is NFTs, purchasing NFTs in the metaverse. So that's, you know, whether people think it's a bubble, it's the future, NFTs are here and people are attracted to it. So a lot of NFT sort of sales are now in the metaverse, you know, and it's a unique, and you know, it's your digital economy. So it's, you know, you saw NFTs first in the art world, you know, it's a unique electronical digital piece of art. And it was like, whether people use it on their phone, like, look, I got, you know, I have the latest, you know, Damien Hirst. It was an early adapter to NFTs, which people didn't even know it was NFTs back then. It was, it was based on blockchain. It was started from, a lot of people in the art world as sort of, buying one thing, the uniqueness, the eliteness, all those different factors, which has now become, brought into music, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, brought into sports. It's like, it's the new version of the baseball card. You had the one of, his first baseball card. So you have all these new types of products that are also going to be sold in this new digital economy, in the digital world of the metaverse. So what I would really think about too, versus chief metaverse, is like a chief digital officer who really understands all this. Because I think it's one part of a big digital economy puzzle, because we are moving in truly a digital economy.
Okay, so on that note, on the economy note, as far as I understand it, okay, the idea of metaverses that are built around cryptocurrency economies, which is kind of what you're getting at, Lisa, right? That has really taken off. So, that's NFTs for sure, to the extent that, I really understand that. I think there's other examples as well. I'm sure Flavia is like dealing with other examples of these metaverses built around cryptocurrency all the time. I definitely, Caroline, wanted to hear from you about blockchain and cryptocurrency economies. And I have to bring up, there's this, I read about the Axie. I didn't know about this until I read about this, but this is, I just think it's fascinating. And I think it's so on point with what we're talking about, where apparently it's become this massive revenue generator for people in the Philippines who started to create these pets, these digital pets that are bred, called Axies. And then they're selling these like little baby Axie creatures, and they're making $2 billion. Like, this is like a really real revenue stream. So like, that is something, you're not like a little kid in school and you're like, I'm gonna grow up and breed Axies on the internet. Like, what? but so anyway, I was wondering, Caroline, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So much to unpack when it comes to the digital economy in a metaverse. And I just, for a second, I have to say, when you brought up the chief metaverse officer, I was like, yeah, that's cool. Like, who wants that job? Me, hello. But anyway, so the Axies and earning a living, making a product that's for the metaverse, and then the money that you're making is cryptocurrency. I mean, it's like, it just, to me, that's what the metaverse is. It's that you're living almost the same kind of life you can in the physical world, in a virtual world. I know there's many different definitions of the metaverse, but that's the one that kind of sticks in my head. And so the idea of cryptocurrency being the way that we do trade in the metaverse makes total sense. And because cryptocurrency, blockchain, and that is supportive of cryptocurrencies, is to prevent fraud, which we can all talk about in another time. But because of that, I think it is going to become, or is already, the currency of choice in the metaverse versus, let's say, another virtual type of currency called the credit card, which has a lot of issues when it comes to, it's a credit system versus what is actually in a wallet being exchanged from person to person. So, I think that I think it's here to stay, cryptocurrencies. I think the metaverse, some version of it, whatever we end up deciding it is also going to be here to stay. And I think that the cryptocurrency is going to be the method of exchange and trade in the metaverse. And so that's why I think it's so important for security experts to get involved in this now and start to understand it now. It is my own personal soapbox, because there are fallacies, right? You have to rely on developers knowing how to develop the code securely. That's fallacy number one. It's a problem. It does happen. Other things are, like we saw with NFTs, where there were things put in the NFTs, or even the people who were building the NFTs turned out to be not the nicest people in the world. And so you have to do your diligence on who's providing the NFT, and not just who's buying it, but who's selling it. And all these, there's just so many issues. It's like hard to unpack in the few minutes that we have left. But I think it's exciting to be able to have the ability to have a cryptocurrency or different cryptocurrencies, because if you think about currency today with paper money, you know, there's all these exchange rates, there's all these things that have to be figured out. And you know, I'd love Flavia's opinion on that in the metaverse, frankly. But I do think that the very concept of it being this sort of immutable system that's based off of trying to eliminate fraud and middlemen, and
Right.
putting that in the metaverse is such a huge opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you. And Flavia, I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well. I mean, I guess like, but to bring this back to, you know, GC's listening, thinking about what do I think about today to prepare my business for tomorrow? If the metaverse is here to stay, if the metaverse is frequently built around cryptocurrency economies, then it makes sense that for many of these people listening, their companies, whatever industry they're in, their company could very likely have some sort of revenue stream or business model that is in the metaverse and that is using cryptocurrency to secure it. So then what should your just run-of-the-mill general counsel who's not in fintech, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because there are many things to think about. But if you think it's exactly on the exchange of value, right? If you have a storefront on the metaverse, you're going to be engaging with folks and you'll be expecting them to make a payment for some type of service or good that you're offering in the metaverse. One thing to think about is what I said earlier. Not all cryptocurrencies are created the same, right? So if you're going to be enabling payments with a Bitcoin, enabling payments with ETH, enabling payments with different types of tokens that are like Sol, there is a Solana token, or if you're going to be enabling with a stablecoin that's fiat backed, they're going to be different considerations because of volatility of tokens, right? And how is it that the price goes up and down? When you have someone like a USDC that is a one-to-one always, is very easy, right? The value that you have in US dollars that you would associate with that good or service is what you're going to price it for USDC. However, if you're pricing for Bitcoin, if you're pricing for Sol, if you're pricing for ETH, you're going to have considerations around how is it they're going to truly value that asset because of the volatility, right? That it can go up and down on a day-to-day or, you know, on a matter of days or weeks. So this is one of the things to think about, because consumers, particularly consumers, may not be well informed of the transactions and what it is that is taking place. May think, well, I have one Bitcoin, so I can buy one of your things. Not understand the Bitcoin may value of $50,000 at that period of time, and you have a lot more that you can spend with that Bitcoin, right? So just really understanding how is it that you price the goods or services that you offer in your storefront in the metaverse, and how you make that really clear to retail consumers, right? To Lisa's point, understanding their background, their culture, their understanding of technology, of financial services. You have a lot of folks that may be engaging in these activities that are unbanked, underbanked, that come from different types of backgrounds, educational backgrounds, maybe literate in financial services or illiterate in financial services. So it's critical that when you inform them, that you think of all these different elements to make sure that you are, you know, that they understand what they are getting themselves into pretty much, and they're making informed decisions as they engage with your storefront.
Wow, right, that's a great point, because then what risk does the business bear if those disclaimers are not up to date for cryptocurrency and the metaverse?
That's the question that the regulators have today. Like, how do we make this safe and sound? How do we make sure that folks understand what they're getting themselves into? What is the extent of the disclosures that you need to make? This is why there has been some consideration at the federal level, especially at the SEC, of treating a lot of these activities as securities. Right? Why? Because that would entail a certain level of disclosures that they believe would inform the investors on what it is that they're doing. Whether that's the correct treatment or not for these type of activities remains to be seen. Some of them agree with it, some of them disagree, right? And that's the conversation that is being had today. But what I think is, nonetheless, whether they're treated as securities or not, you do need to inform the folks that you're dealing with, depending on the type of customer that you have, the type of activity that you're engaging in, and how is it that you're going to be interacting with them. It's critical that they understand, you know, the type of activity, the risk associated with it, and the immutability of these transactions. Because if you're dealing with credit card transactions, there are chargebacks. ACH transactions, they're reversals of returns. There's no reversal in blockchain transactions. They're immutable. Once it's in the blockchain, it's in the blockchain. Unless it needs to, there's some illegal activity, they're going to try to, void that and split and fork that off. These are immutable transactions. So they need to understand when this transaction is complete. There's no calling the company saying, hey, can you reverse this for me? Doesn't work that way.
Oh my God, so fascinating. Okay, so same question that I asked Caroline when it came to privacy, like, who do you call to help you get your privacy policy right? Who do you call if you're that general counsel and your company has this virtual storefront and is selling something and they're going to use some sort of cryptocurrency and it lands on your desk and they're like, figure it out, like tell us what's the right currency and put the right disclaimers up. Like, who does that lawyer call? Is it's outside counsel? Are there like certain firms that really have just built out a practice area where they're expert in this? I just wonder if any of you have concrete recommendations. Maybe not. Maybe this is
concrete individuals. I have concrete individuals. So, and my first call is to my product team. I want to understand what I'm asking first, because if you don't understand, you need to really understand the data that's being used. So you understand, the privacy policy that's going to align with it. That's the most important first step. So before I jump, because outside counsel, when you call them, that's going to be their first question to you. What the how's data you use? So the first step is really sort of aligning with your privacy team, and the more with your product team, and because the more you sort of have this relationship too with your product team, working with them on getting an understanding of the data, the better your privacy policy will be, because then they're going to share the information that you really know that can help inform yourself to guide it properly. And where's the data touching? Who's it touching? What, is it, what countries is it touching? You want to get all that, you want to gather all that information first, because then you'll know what laws are going to apply to you. Because sad but true, which is one of my pet peeves, we still don't have a federal privacy policy in the United States, which drives me insane on my soapbox. But that's, so that's where I would think about it. And then sort of, there are some great, outside counsels that, I'm sure we've all worked with that, we call and get comfortable, that either help us refresh, update, or build our, public policies.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you all so much. And this is just so fascinating. I had like a lightning, final takeaway tip question I wanted to ask from each of you. I feel like, Lisa, we got yours. Flavia, do you have a really fast, quick final takeaway? And Caroline, if you have one, you can bring us home. Flavia.
Yes, you're never done learning on this. It's a constant evolution for all of us. So let's keep on collaborating. This industry grows by us sharing knowledge and information with each other and making sure that we are keeping ourselves up to date. This fourth floor is a great resource for us to network and learn from each other. Thank you, Brain.
Thank you. Caroline.
Sorry, just answering the question in the chat before we ended. Okay, so many issues to think about when it comes to this topic, the metaverse and Web3. The best piece of advice I can give is don't bury your head in the sand. Get out there, start learning, start figuring it out, because your company is going to move into it at some level or another.
I love it. Thank you all. Thank you everyone who came today. And thank you, Lisa, Flavia, Caroline. You guys are phenomenal, fantastic. General counsels everywhere are thanking you.